I was at the laundromat again. Same cracked linoleum. Same hum of machines that never fully drowned out the silence. I'd gotten used to it. Wednesday evenings, empty basket in, folded shirts out. Routine had a way of making the hours blur together. That night, though, she walked in. Not like it was the first time. She lived a few doors down from us, a friend of my mom's. They sometimes lingered on the porch together, trading neighborhood stories I pretended not to hear. But here, under the yellow light and the buzz of old dryers, she looked different. Less like my mom's friend, and more like someone who didn't quite belong in this stale place. She caught my eye, and I glanced away too fast, back to the dryer window where my shirts tumbled in circles. "You picked the wrong night," she said lightly, sliding a bag of laundry onto the folding table near mine. "Half the machines are dead." I nodded, forcing a small laugh. "Guess I like bad timing." Her smile tilted. "Or maybe you like quiet." That line sat between us longer than it should have. I fiddled with the hem of a damp t-shirt, folding and refolding it until the corners lined up sharp. We talked in pieces after that. Nothing that would stand out if anyone else overheard. She noticed my coffee cup on the chair beside me, asked if I still went to the little shop on Main. She remembered my order, black, no sugar. That surprised me. I didn't think she noticed things like that. "Still drinking it the hard way?" she asked. "Easier than explaining what I want," I said. It came out drier than I intended, but she laughed anyway, soft and quick. It was strange, the way she held eye contact. Not insistent, not careless either. Just steady enough that I caught myself looking away, first every time. I checked my phone twice, though there was nothing new. A few half-written messages to friends sat unsent in my drafts. I couldn't explain why I didn't send them. Sometimes it felt easier to stay in the silence. She noticed, I think. Her hand slowed as she folded a towel, smoothing it down even though it was already neat. "Your mom said you've been busy," she said, like it was a question she wasn't asking directly. "Yeah," I murmured. "Something like that." For a while we just folded. The air smelled faintly of detergent and the heat of overworked dryers. A coin rolled off the counter somewhere, the small clink echoing in the emptiness. When she finished, she didn't leave right away. She leaned against the table, eyes on me in a way that felt almost too close, like she could see the things I wasn't saying. Then, quieter than before, she said, "You'll change your mind for me, darling." It wasn't playful, not really. More like she knew something I didn't yet. I froze with a shirt half folded in my hands, my throat dry, heart stumbling in that small, stupid way when the room suddenly shifts. By the time I looked up, she was already pulling her bag over her shoulder, casual again, like nothing had happened. "See you around," she said, and walked out into the night. The door shut behind her, leaving the laundromat too quiet. I sat down slowly, phone buzzing in my pocket. One new message. Not from her, but I stared at it anyway, unsure why I suddenly hoped it might be. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. But 2 nights later, there she was, standing on her porch with a mug in her hand, steam rising into the cool air. I'd just come back from a late grocery run, arms full of bags I probably didn't need. "You always shop this late?" she asked, leaning against the railing like she'd been waiting for someone to pass by. "Helps me avoid the lines," I said, shifting the bags in my arms. "And the small talk." She smiled at that, slow and knowing. "Fair enough." I don't know what made me stop instead of heading straight inside. Maybe it was the way she looked, comfortable in a sweater that hung loose on her frame, hair pinned back like she'd stopped caring halfway through. Not polished, not prepared. Just her. She tilted her head. "Need help with those?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, if you don't mind." Inside my kitchen, she set the bags down and started unpacking like she belonged there. Pulling out cans, placing them neatly in the cupboard. I found myself watching her hands. How calm they were, how sure. "You live too much on frozen food," she said, holding up a box of microwavable pasta. "Easy," I muttered. "Does the job." She gave me a look, not judgmental exactly, but the kind that saw more than I wanted her to. Then, softer. Your mom told me once you used to love cooking with your dad. Sunday mornings. I blinked, thrown off. She told you that. She talks about you more than you think. The memories surfaced too easily. Me at 12, standing on a chair to reach the stove, my dad showing me how to flip pancakes without tearing them. The smell of butter and syrup. My chest tightened unexpectedly. I haven't thought about that in years, I admitted, setting down a carton of milk harder than I meant to. She didn't push, just poured water into my old kettle, found 2 mugs, and waited for the whistle. We drank tea at my small table, the silence between us stretching thin but not uncomfortable. She wrapped both hands around her mug, as if holding the heat steady. I caught myself imagining her like this more often, sitting across from me in quiet evenings. The thought startled me, and I pushed it away fast. The risk was there, unspoken. She was older, my mother's friend. People talked in neighborhoods like ours. And yet, sitting there, the weight of those facts blurred against the pull of her presence. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought, watching the steam curl between us. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. When she finished her tea, she stood, slipping her sweater tighter around her shoulders. At the door, she paused, her hand brushing the side of my arm as she thanked me. Light, almost nothing, but it stayed burning under my sleeve long after she left. The next time wasn't planned. It never was. I was heading out with my keys in hand when I saw her kneeling by her car, trying to wrestle with a stubborn tire valve. The evening light was thinning, the air carrying that dampness right before a storm. You look like you're losing, I said, hovering awkwardly near the curb. She looked up, strands of hair falling loose, a smudge of dirt on her wrist. It's the valve cap. Won't budge. I crouched beside her, reaching instinctively. My hand brushed hers for the briefest second, warm, tense, then gone. Let me. It came loose quicker than either of us expected. The relief made us laugh, too loud for such a small thing. Then the silence returned, heavier than before. Thanks, she said, eyes staying on me longer than necessary. Something shifted in that stillness. My chest tightened, like the space between us was smaller than it had been a moment ago. That's when the sound came, my phone buzzing in my pocket. My mom's name on the screen. I froze. She noticed. You should answer, she said quietly, pulling her hands back into her lap. I let it ring until it stopped. Didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to explain why my throat felt thick. She stood then, brushing off her knees. Her voice was lighter again, almost too careful. Your mom mentioned you'd been out late. Thought maybe you were seeing someone. I blinked at her. I'm not. The words came out sharper than I meant. She tilted her head, like she wanted to believe me, but couldn't quite. Then she smiled, thin, tired. Doesn't matter. The interruption had cracked something. I could feel it. Still, she followed me inside when I offered her water, almost absent-mindedly. We ended up in the kitchen again. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me fumble with glasses. The silence stretched. You ever think about just leaving? I asked suddenly, not looking at her. Her breath caught faintly. All the time, she admitted. Then a small pause. But leaving never really solves anything, does it? I turned. Her eyes were softer than I'd ever seen them. Not guarded. Not pretending. I took a step closer without meaning to. Close enough to see the lines at the corners of her eyes. The way her breath shifted when she realized the space between us was nearly gone. For a moment, one suspended heartbeat, I thought it would happen. That tilt forward. That invisible gravity. But then the front door creaked open. My mom's voice floated in from the hall, calling my name. We both jerked back, too fast, as if nothing had been about to happen at all. When I glanced at her again, she was already smoothing her sweater, face composed, like the moment hadn't existed. And yet, my arm still tingled where it had brushed against hers, carrying a truth neither of us had said. It was late again. Not planned. Never planned. She'd been walking home from the corner store, paper bag in her arms. I caught up without thinking, offering to carry it. She let me, quiet thanks under her breath. We ended up side by side on the narrow sidewalk, our steps out of rhythm, brushing close now and then. At the park, she slowed, sat down on the bench that overlooked the basketball court, empty this time of night. The bag crinkled as she set it between us, but neither of us touched it. "You've been keeping to yourself more," she said finally, eyes fixed somewhere past the trees. "Maybe," I said. "Not maybe." Her voice was steady, but softer than usual. "You disappear." I picked at the bench slat with my nail, staring at the faint grooves in the wood. Easier than explaining myself. She glanced at me then, sharp but not unkind. "You think I don't understand that?" Something in the way she said it cracked me open. I wanted to tell her everything. Why I never answered my mom's calls on the first ring, why the empty apartment felt louder than the street outside, why her voice stayed with me long after we parted. But all I managed was, "You make it harder to keep to myself." She stilled, shoulders tight. Then a low laugh, but not amused. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." My throat ached. "I know exactly what I'm saying." The silence was heavy. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the buzz of a streetlight struggling to stay lit. Her hands tightened around each other in her lap. "I'm too old for this," she whispered. "For you. You don't feel old." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her head turned sharply, eyes on mine. A storm of things unsaid there. "You don't know what this would cost me," she said. "I've thought about it," I admitted. "More than I should." She exhaled, shaky, like a wall giving way brick by brick. "I see you, and I keep telling myself it's nothing. Just a phase. Just loneliness." But then, she cut herself off, biting her lip. "Then what?" I asked. My voice cracked at the edges. Her gaze lingered on me, raw and unguarded in a way that felt like too much, too fast. Her hand shifted on the bench, fingers brushing mine. Light enough it could have been accidental. But it wasn't. I didn't move. Couldn't. The night pressed in around us. Every word unsaid sat between our hands, between our breaths. Then she pulled back, just slightly. Not gone, but hovering. Her lips parted, but the words caught. I leaned in, slow, heart stuttering. Close enough that the warmth of her breath reached me. She stopped me with one line, so quiet I almost missed it. "What are you really asking me?" After that night on the bench, I thought something would change. That we'd either cross the line or step back for good. But nothing happened. Not right away. The next morning, her porch was empty. By evening, her car was gone. I waited for the familiar pattern, her out watering plants at dusk, a wave, some small excuse to linger. Nothing. 2 days passed. Then 3. When I finally saw her again, it was at the grocery store. Broad daylight, a Saturday. She was by the produce aisle, laughing at something on her phone. A man stood beside her, gray hair at his temples, leaning close like he belonged there. She caught sight of me before I could look away. Her smile faltered, but she recovered fast, lifting a hand in a casual wave. The kind neighbors give each other. I nodded back, forcing my feet to keep moving. My cart clattered louder than it should have down the aisle. That night, I kept replaying it in my head. The way she leaned in toward him. The way her laugh sounded different, lighter, freer. Was it her ex? A friend? Someone new entirely? I told myself it didn't matter. But I found myself walking slower past her house, listening for signs she was home. The silence pressed heavier than her presence ever had. When she finally knocked on my door again, 3 nights later, I almost didn't answer. She stood there with a Tupperware container, some leftover stew. "Made too much," she said, voice too even. I thanked her, but the air between us was thick, awkward. She didn't step inside. I wanted to ask about the man at the store, but my mouth stayed shut. Instead, I gestured at the container. "This looks good." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for something. Then she smiled, small, polite. "Heated slow. Tastes better that way." And just like that, she left. I sat at the table with the container untouched in front of me, spoon resting on the lid. My phone buzzed with a new message from a friend asking about plans for the weekend. I opened the chat, typed, "She brought me food." I don't know what that means. I stared at the words, thumb hovering over the send button. Then I erased them. Instead, I set the phone face down. The stew sat there, cooling by the minute. I didn't feel heartbroken. I thought, staring at the untouched container. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That night, I didn't knock on her door, didn't walk past her porch, just stayed still, waiting for something that never came. It happened on an ordinary evening. No storm, no excuse. Just me stepping outside with the trash and seeing her on her porch, arms wrapped around herself against the chill. I almost waved, almost kept walking. But something in the way she sat, still, shoulders bent like she was holding too much, made me stop. "You okay?" I asked, my voice too soft for the distance. She looked up, startled, then a nod that didn't convince either of us. "Just tired." I crossed the space before I could second-guess it. Stood at the bottom of her steps, trash bag dangling stupidly from my hand. "You don't seem tired," I said. Her eyes flicked away. You shouldn't come over like this." "Why not?" She sighed, long and heavy, like the words hurt to carry. "Because people talk. Because your mom." She broke off, biting down on the rest. I dropped the bag by my side. "I don't care what people say." "That's because you're young," she whispered. "You think consequences are just rumors. They're not. They stay." The silence stretched. My heart felt like it was pushing against my ribs. "I saw you at the store," I blurted before I could stop myself. "With him." Her face shifted, not guilty, not exactly. Just weary. "An old friend. That's all." I swallowed. Felt like more. She met my eyes then. Direct. Raw. "Do you want it to have been?" The question stole my breath. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. "Finally," I said, "I just don't want to be invisible anymore." Her hand tightened on the railing, knuckles pale. Slowly, she came down one step. We were closer now, shadows touching in the porch light. "You're not invisible," she said, voice low, almost breaking. "That's the problem." I laughed, short and nervous, rubbing the back of my neck. "So what do we do?" For the first time in weeks, she didn't look away. She studied me, long enough that I had to fight not to drop my gaze. Then, careful, she reached out, just her fingertips brushing my wrist, light as a breath. The touch wasn't dramatic, wasn't even long, but it landed with a weight I felt everywhere. "Maybe we do nothing," she said softly. "Maybe that's the only way to keep from breaking it." Her words should have felt like an ending, but her hand lingered a second longer, enough to steady me. Enough to make silence feel like something shared, not empty. I exhaled, finally letting myself smile, small, uneven. "Okay." She smiled back, tired but real. And for the first time, it felt like we'd both said what needed saying, even if the words were few. Time didn't end after that night on her porch. It stretched forward, slow and ordinary. That was the strange part, how normal it all looked from the outside. I still went to the laundromat on Wednesdays. Still bought too much frozen food. Still ignored half the calls from my mom. And yet, something had shifted. Quiet. Like furniture moved an inch when you weren't looking. She stopped pulling back as much. We never talked about it, not directly, but the space between us grew smaller in steady ways. A walk to the corner store became routine. Tea in my kitchen became habit. We didn't announce it, didn't define it. We just were. The bench in the park became ours. Not every night. Just enough. Sometimes she'd bring the same paper bag from the store, fruit or bread, and we'd sit there while the light drained out of the sky. No grand confessions. No demands. Just the comfort of someone who didn't need you to explain why you were quiet. One morning, 8:47 a.m., exactly, I stopped by the coffee shop on Main. The barista already knew my order, black no sugar, but before I could speak, she slipped her own cup onto the counter beside mine. "Add milk?" she told the barista, without looking at me. Her hand brushed mine as she paid for both. It was nothing, really, just coffee. But when we walked out together, steam curling from the lids, I knew we had both decided something without saying it. At her place, I found the old kettle on the stove, the one she'd used that night she told me I wasn't invisible. It whistled louder than it needed to, like it wanted to be noticed. She poured tea for herself, coffee for me. The smell of detergent from her laundry clung faintly to the room. She looked across the table, hair falling loose the way it always did, and said, "You fold your shirts wrong." I laughed, shaking my head. "You've been waiting weeks to say that." Her smile was small, but it held. Maybe. And that was it. No fireworks. No trembling declarations. Just two people who had circled each other long enough to finally stand still in the same place. Life didn't magically fix itself. My mom still asked questions I dodged. Neighbors still watched. She still carried the weight of years I hadn't lived. But when she set her mug down and reached across the table to touch my wrist, steady and deliberate, it felt like an answer. Not a solution. Not forever. Just an answer. I thought of that night at the laundromat, when she whispered I'd change my mind for her. Maybe she'd been right. Maybe I had. But it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like arriving. And that was enough. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?